If it's Friday, President Biden, with a little help from some famous friends, rakes in tens of millions of dollars, but not without interruptions from pro-Palestinian protesters. Plus, the president says he's heading to Baltimore next week to view the wreckage of the Francis Scott Key Bridge as officials prepare for a massive and daunting operation to clear the critical waterway. And American journalist Evan Gershkovich marks 1 year in Russian prison as Washington renews calls for his release, including a rare bipartisan statement from the top 4 congressional leaders. Welcome to Meet the Press Now. I'm Kristen Welker in Washington. We begin today with the 2024 race for the White House and both campaigns' efforts to build momentum and build up their campaign war chests. The Biden campaign is celebrating what it says is a massive $26 million fundraising haul last night from the celebrity-filled event with former Presidents Clinton and Obama. The campaign hopes to leverage their cash advantage to overcome their polling gap with former President Trump. The Biden team did not allow reporters to record video inside the event, which featured the 3 leaders taking part in a nearly hour-long conversation moderated by late-night host Stephen Colbert. But this morning, the campaign releasing edited clips from the event, seeming to signal what they hope the big takeaway from last night will be.
When those folks came out of the fields carrying torches and Nazi flags and accompanied by white supremacists. And a young woman was killed, a bystander. And when the former president was asked what he thought of that, he said they're very fine people on both sides. We're at a real inflection point in history. Things are changing. This guy denies there's a global warming. This guy wants to get rid of not only Roe v. Wade, but which he brags about having done. He wants to get rid of the ability of anyone anywhere in America to ever choose. I mean, all the things he's doing are so old. Speaking of old.
But as President Biden focused on former President Trump, he was also forced to grapple with tensions within his own party over his handling of the Israel-Hamas war. Protesters interrupted the conversation between the presidents at least 4 times, saying the president has, quote, blood on his hands.
Shame on you, Joe Biden! Shame on you! Shame on you! You are funding genocide in Palestine!
Now, responding to a question about the war from Mr. Colbert, Mr. Biden said more needs to be done to get relief for the dire humanitarian situation in Gaza, while noting that Israel's existence was at stake. But it was former President Obama's defense of President Biden on the Gaza issue that drew the most attention, at one point sternly addressing the protesters himself. According to the press pool in the room, Mr. Obama saying, quote, "You can't just talk and not listen. That's what the other side does. And it is possible for us to understand that it is possible to have moral clarity and have deeply held beliefs, but still recognize that the world is complicated and it is hard to solve these problems." Meanwhile, a third former president was in New York yesterday. We're talking about Donald Trump, who attended the wake of an NYPD officer killed in the line of duty. Mr. Trump was subdued as he briefly addressed reporters late yesterday afternoon as he left the wake, but this morning used the tragedy to attack President Biden on the issue of crime.
I think that politically he can't support the police. I think he's also making a mistake. But I think politically his base won't let him support the police. They didn't even call the family. They could have called. You don't have to be a rocket scientist to know. Even a call would be perhaps, I'm not sure they'd take his call.
And the former president is also upping the ante on the cash clash between the two candidates. As first reported by the Financial Times, the Trump campaign is aiming to take in $33 million at an upcoming Mar-a-Lago fundraiser in April and surpass the single event record by Mr. Biden that was set last night. Joining me now is our resident Biden expert, Mike Memoli, and NBC's Vaughn Hilliard, who's covering the Trump campaign. Thanks to both of you for starting us off. So, Mike, let me start with you. The campaign, as we just showed did release some clips from the Three Presidents fundraiser. But you were there at this extraordinary and, quite frankly, historic event. Take us inside the room. What were your biggest takeaways?
Well, Kristen, Lizzo and Queen Latifah, for instance, got them fired up. You had Mindy Kaling. She got the crowd laughing. You had that dramatic entrance, those three presidents rising from under the stage, putting those aviator sunglasses on in solidarity with Joe Biden at the end. It was really quite a moment. We do have to step back and remember, only 45 men have served as the president of the United States. And this was a unique opportunity for this audience and for myself to hear them talk about that. And it was really through the lens of the presidency and the weight of that job that Bill Clinton and Barack Obama both tried in their own different and unique ways to address some of the vulnerabilities President Biden is facing as he runs for re-election. For Bill Clinton, he was the explainer-in-chief, the secretary of explaining stuff. He was trying to take these complex economic data trends and really explain what the disconnect is between what voters feel and what the data really does show us. We also saw Barack Obama. He, I'm told, felt that his mission, at this moment at least in the campaign, is to talk about Joe Biden, the man, talk about his character and talk about the unique skills and personal traits that he's bringing into this very difficult, fraught moment in our politics, and to try to send him on to continue what the campaign really feels has been a streak of momentum since the State of the Union address.
Yeah, absolutely. And that the optics of the event last night certainly worth their weight in gold from a political perspective if you are the Biden campaign. But, Mike, as we also noted, there were a number of interruptions at that event last night. It speaks to the fact that this issue, the protests within the Democratic Party, are going to loom large over this entire re-election campaign by the president. How did the presidents respond to those protesters, Mike?
Well, you see what it looked like outside, Kristen, but in the room as well. They paid the ticket price to be able to speak truth to power, in their view, to the president in that moment. I thought it was so fascinating, Kristen, the way in which the campaign clearly had a plan for when this happened. They were addressing an innocuous question that Stephen Colbert had asked when one of the first protests began, and Colbert immediately took it back. He gave a little bit of a monologue and then posed a question to President Biden about how he is grappling with this issue. But it was really, and you showed the quote, Barack Obama, who I think provided a little bit of a cathartic release for the rest of that audience, which became very frustrated with those interruptions. He was very stern. You remember it from his second term when he often got interrupted at some of his events by some protesters to say, that's not what we do. That's what the other side does. It's not enough to talk. You need to be able to listen. And I think a lot of Democrats who, yes, are worried about this Gaza issue, but also don't want to see Democrats focused on an internal battle when they should be focused on the general election. That's a message maybe the campaign is going to release yet another clip from before too long.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised about that. And Mike, just one more for you. Obviously, they raised this historic amount, more than $25 million. We are now learning they're going to open up 30 campaign offices in Michigan. So there's certainly a practical use to all of this money. What are you hearing about the strategy to put these funds to good use? Because obviously money doesn't translate into a win. We saw that in 2016 when Hillary Clinton certainly had more money in her war chest, but still wound up losing.
Well, Kristen, you've been reporting, as has our team, about the frustration some Democrats have had about the slow start to Biden's campaign. They had wondered, for instance, where's the ground game in Michigan? Well, it's not a coincidence that today they announced 30 new campaign offices in that important swing state, putting that money to use also in a new campaign ad targeting those Nikki Haley voters. The Biden campaign saying this new ad, using Donald Trump's own words to criticize Nikki Haley, will be targeted in battleground states, specifically where zip codes where Nikki Haley overperformed against Donald Trump in those primaries and caucuses. So this is the Biden team having a significant cash advantage, wanting to press ahead with it. I was just in North Carolina as well, talking to strategists there in that key battleground state. They said they've never seen the kind of investment from Democrats in that important state the way that the Biden team is already on the ground now.
All right, Mike, covering all the angles for us fun. Let me turn to you. This obviously is something that has caught former President Trump's attention. He wasted no time attacking the fundraiser. He's also planning his own big dollar fundraiser in Mar-a-Lago. He's hoping to top that $25 million figure. What are you hearing about that, Vaughn?
Right, and it's no surprise that Donald Trump, he chose to go on the attack against a New York City fundraiser that more than $26 million raised Well, he was attending the wake of the fallen officer, the NYPD officer Jonathan Diller, yesterday afternoon. It was using that as a moment to try to highlight the way that he views crime in America and try to undercut the Biden administration and ramp up a rhetoric around crime, despite FBI statistics showing violent crime in the United States dropping over the last year, but try to use that moment to draw a contrast. Of course, you said it, he is having his own major fundraiser next week down at Mar-a-Lago. You're seeing a lot of old hands, several billionaires that are helping host this, from Harold Hamm to Woody Johnson to the Mercers to Steve Wynn. These major figures here where prices for these tickets are going at over $800,000, with most of those contributions ultimately going to the RNC, which is one of his co-campaign managers is now at the helm of. And so for Donald Trump, there is a cash deficit here. And even just yesterday, a senior campaign official acknowledged that they are not going to be able to go dollar for dollar against the Biden campaign, acknowledging that over the next 7 months, they will be out fundraised by the Biden campaign, but contended that at least they will have enough money in order to pull off a win, enough money to suffice to make sure that Donald Trump's message does get out there, Kristen.
And Vaughn, quickly, I want to get to some of your new reporting out of Arizona. You're reporting that some Republicans are starting to lose faith in Kari Lake. What are you hearing? What's the fallout been?
Right. Along with trying to gain back the White House, for Republicans, they're trying to gain back a Republican Senate majority. And Arizona would be a good place to look. Their likely candidate is going to be Republican Kari Lake, who, of course, lost her 2022 gubernatorial bid. But the big question was she going to be able to win over some of those reticent Republicans, those McCain-era Republicans, Ducey Republicans, who she had spurned and had explicitly said she didn't need in order to win her governor's race in 2022. But she lost by just 17,000 votes. And so Kari Lake herself acknowledged this winter, Kristen, that she needed to prove that she was a less divisive figure. But I can tell you from conversations with a litany of Arizona Republicans over the course of last weeks that she is struggling to do that and to throw away the sort of the antics of the past. Just one example, a fundraiser, a major GOP fundraiser, a former campaign manager to John McCain, in fact, told me that she is fundraising instead for the likes of Dave McCormick out of Pennsylvania. One other activist, she told me that she met up for an iced tea with Kari Lake and wanted Kari Lake to apologize to her and other Republicans, and that she said the words "I'm sorry" never came out of Kari Lake's mouth, and she said in no way will she vote for Kari Lake this November. A concerning position for Republicans in Arizona.
For sure. And of course, the big question, what will the impact be? Will we see similar trends in other states? Vaughn Hilliard, thank you so much. Really appreciate it. Great reporting as always. Joining me now on set is my NBC News colleague, Monica Alba. She covers the White House. Faz Shakur, senior advisor to Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders. And Danielle Pletka, a senior fellow at the American Enterprise Institute. Thanks to all of you for being here on this Good Friday. Really appreciate it. Monica, let me start with you. Let's talk about this historic fundraiser. Of course, you were among those who broke the news that this was going to happen in the first place. What does the Biden team think they got out of last night, and are they going to be able to build on this momentum?
And it was weeks and months in the making, Kristen. This was a first of its kind event. They wanted it to be historic from the perspective of the amount of money that it raised, but also they really wanted to project this party unity, to have the president with his Democratic predecessors on stage trying to tell anybody in the party who might be a little bit anxious about the president's lagging poll numbers or where he is in this race, hey, look, it's time to get on board. Look at everything we have behind us. Look at now the resources that we're going to be able to put forward with this kind of money. And they had set expectations way lower, something like maybe we'll get $10 million out of this. Then it was upped a little bit. And then when they came out with this blockbuster number of $26 million all told, they really are now trying to show what they can use. And they're trying to have this be kind of an exclamation point on this month of action. They wanted March since the State of the Union for there to be all this momentum ending in this and now being able to say, here's how we can build upon that in the coming weeks and months.
Well, and I pick up on that point, Faz, because that's the question. How are they going to build upon this? We talked about the new campaign offices are going to be opening up in Michigan. I mean, what needs to happen to keep the momentum going? How present do former presidents Obama and Clinton need to be on the campaign trail in order to have an impact?
It's going to take a team effort, Kristen, everybody and anybody. I think Biden's got some wind at his back, so you see the public polling starting to rise for him. 8 states he visited in 18 days. He's got a times cash advantage on Trump, those matter. I think when you're looking at Trump's own problems right now, he's not traveling as much. And one of the things that people don't realize why you're not traveling and doing big rallies, they cost money. And when you're in a cash crunch, you know, Trump has kind of moderated his campaign to not do much right now because he's losing money. And he's on, it's weird to say that he's a paper billionaire this week, right? We learned that you got him selling Trump media and getting on paper at least $1 billion, which he can't seemingly spend right now. He's locked up a bit on it. And what I think is happening is he's getting more and more indebted to billionaires and large investors who he's going to court at this major event that we're seeing. He needs them for his Trump acquisition. And I think that can posit a dynamic in which helps Biden as he tries to move through these next few months about what is the clear distinction and who fights for you, particularly when you think about economic matters.
Yeah, Danny, I mean, the clear message of last night was this is all hands on deck now. We have seen past presidents have an impact before. We saw former President Clinton actually help then President Obama when he was in the fight of his political life. But here you have Trump saying, hey, I'm going to have an even bigger fundraiser. What do you think the impact and the takeaway is?
Look, you know, if you look at this from the perspective of money, as you rightly say, this is a great haul. This is really important for the Democratic Party, showing that solidarity. Biden needs all the help he can get. Just from his status within the party, from doubts about him, so showing everybody together. On the other hand, you know, you're not exactly speaking to disgruntled voters worrying about the gas tank or the price of milk or the price of eggs when you've got, you know, the editor of Vogue and Lizzo and Stephen Colbert. You know, it wasn't really an of the people type event.
They were talking to the chorus last night.
They were. And you know what? When you need to raise money, that's who you talk to. Yeah. I don't fault them for that any more than I fault Donald Trump for going to billionaires. I think that that'll be an interesting place for an argument because, of course, both sides are very dependent upon very rich people. Who will get the most small donations will be a great question.
Well,
it sure will.
Policy discussions, too, and we're seeing, you know, with Trump's position on TikTok, how it moves, how his positions on carried interest loopholes might move, how his positions on a lot of economic matters might move. He's a flexible, yeah.
That's what we need to understand.
You talk about reaching beyond the base, which I think is obviously, as in every election, going to be where the battle lines are going. I want to play this piece from a new ad from the Biden campaign, which is really going after those Nikki Haley voters. Take a look.
Nikki Haley has made an unholy alliance with rhinos, never Trumpers, Americans for no prosperity. She was sitting there like...
She's gone crazy. She's a very angry person.
She is not presidential timber. I don't need the votes. We have all the votes we need.
She's gone haywire.
There aren't that many never Trumpers anymore.
How do you bring these Nikki Haley voters back into the tent?
I'm not sure we need too many.
Monica, talk about this strategy. I'm not sure we need too many, former President Trump said of the Nikki Haley voters.
Using the former president's own words in this ad, the Biden campaign feels is the best strategy to try to make this kind of argument. But they were the ones opening the door the day that Nikki Haley dropped out of the race. Remember, the president put out this statement saying, there's room for you in my campaign if you want to consider it. They have known from day one that this is possibly a group of voters that they can at least make overtures to. Now, how many of those actually want to be persuaded enough to do it? They claim that when they have looked at some of these contests and primaries in recent weeks and months, even after Nikki Haley dropped out, there have been people who have supported her instead of Donald Trump. And they say, look, there could be people there who voted early or voted by mail or who could be Democrats in some of those open primaries. But in other cases, there are people there, Republicans and independents, who might just be persuadable. And they know that if there's a small enough slice of that they could convince before November, that could make all the difference in some of the key states. So expect that continued strategy, I think. And they believe that that really does show that they are more willing to do that when the former president has been very clearly dismissive.
He has. And in fact, this is what Laura Trump, who's one of the new top people at the RNC, had to say when asked by our own Vaughn Hilliard about courting those Nikki Haley voters. Let's take a look at that sound.
These people, I don't think they don't want to vote for Joe Biden, that's for sure. The option is Joe Biden or Donald Trump. And so whether you like his personality or not should not have any bearing on anything. They are welcome to come back. We are here to work as a party. And in order to elect Donald Trump and Republicans all the way down the ticket, we would love to have them come back.
This is, of course, an interview with Garrett Haake. My apologies. We just were talking to Vaughn and I confused them. But, Danny, what do you make of that? And is the Trump campaign missing an opportunity here?
Sure, the Trump campaign is missing an opportunity. You know, we just talked about playing to your base. Yeah. Everybody loves to play to your base. Your base loves you, right? You know, it's so warm and fuzzy and nice, but at the same time, that's not who you need. They're going to turn out for you no matter what. So it is about those margins. It is about outreach. This is how Donald Trump lost the election in 2020. And if he is unwilling to reach out to those people, Nikki Haley wants to denigrate her, wants to denigrate her voters, wants to denigrate people like me, who I am a Nikki Haley voter, then that's a mistake. But part two of that, though, Kristen, is that for Biden, this is just, you know, that's nice, that's cute, that's underscoring how wrong Donald Trump is about this. But just speaking as a Nikki Haley voter and a Republican, and most of my friends, many of my friends are, yeah, we're not voting for Joe Biden.
What do you make of that, Faz?
But are you voting for Donald Trump is the question, right? And that is
not me.
Right. And that's the point, is that
if
part of the effort and part of the what Donald Trump, what they're reminding people about Donald Trump is who he referred to as bird brain, Nikki Haley, is that you didn't really like this guy. And we're not going to make you forget it. That in the primary you had certain views and he dismissed you. And if you look at that Lara Trump quote, man, that's pretty awful. That's not the way you court people whose votes you need. You say they're welcome to come back. What pitch are you going to make them? Why would they want to come back? And so Biden, I think, is doing the right move, where he's just reminding people. That's all. Right? People like Danielle will have to make their decision. Do they want to vote? Do they not want to vote? And if people choose to stay home and say, I don't want to vote for Donald Trump, that's still a win for Joe Biden.
All right. Great conversation. Happy Easter to everyone who's going to celebrate. Appreciate your being here on a holiday Friday. Monica, Faz, and Danielle, great stuff coming up. The largest crane on the eastern seaboard has arrived on site of the Baltimore bridge collapse. We're on the ground with the very latest on the recovery and cleanup efforts. Plus, NBC News sits down with the parents of detained U.S. journalist Evan Gershkovich. Their message on the one-year anniversary of their son's imprisonment. You are watching Meet the Press now. Stay with us. Welcome back. President Biden now says he will visit Baltimore next week to assess the situation caused by Tuesday's bridge collapse. Efforts to remove the wreckage from that bridge are now beginning. A crane described as the largest on the eastern seaboard has arrived on the scene of Tuesday's bridge collapse, and a second smaller crane is expected to arrive tomorrow. All of this comes less than a day after federal transportation officials approved $60 million in emergency funding for cleanup and recovery efforts. And as Maryland Governor Wes Moore said just moments ago, this accident could have a devastating toll on the entire country.
What we're talking about today is not just about Maryland's economy. This is about the nation's economy. The port handles more cars and more farm equipment than any other port in this country. Our economy depends on the Port of Baltimore, and the Port of Baltimore depends on vessel traffic. Maryland's economy and Maryland's workers rely on us to move quickly. But that's not just Maryland. The nation's economy and the nation's workers are requiring us to move quickly.
NBC News reporter Gary Grumbach joins me now from Baltimore. So, Gary, what's the assessment? How long will it take for the crane to remove all of that wreckage from the bridge?
Hey there, Kristen. Yeah, this is going to be a weeks and months long process just to get the wreckage off of the boat, let alone from the bridge itself, from the water itself. Let me talk you through a little bit of what this process is going to look like. As you saw, we are starting to see cranes arriving on scene. Here's the largest in the eastern seaboard. That's a 1,000-ton crane that you see in those images right there. They have to cut it into pieces, the bridge, because the bridge itself is 3,000 to 4,000 tons. So that crane can't even handle the bridge itself in one piece. So they're going to cut it into pieces, get those out of the water, make sure there are no more pieces of the bridge even underneath the water 50 feet deep, because they don't want to impact any other ships once the canal opens. And then they're going to start removing the items from the ship itself to be able to get the ship out of the way and reopen the port. This is not something that is going to happen overnight. They will be working on a regular basis to get this done. And really, the cavalry has has arrived here, if you will. I want to talk you through some of the numbers of what we're going to start seeing over the coming days. We're talking 7 cranes, 10 different tugboats, 9 different barges, 8 different salvage vessels, and 5 Coast Guard boats. Dozens of agencies on scene here trying to get this done as quickly as possible. Kristen?
It's just remarkable to hear the breakdown of how many resources will be sent there. Gary, is there any sense of when the port will actually be able to reopen?
Well, Governor Wes Moore, as you heard there, wants to get this done as quickly as possible because there are millions and millions of dollars in economic impact being lost every single day because of this. There's 4,000 or 5,000 workers that work in the port area that no longer can do what they've been doing every day because of this. That is job loss. That is the items that cars and other perfumes and things cannot get in and out of the port. This is something they're going to want to get done within the next few weeks. Kristen?
And Gary, of course, the question becomes about the resources to make sure this happened. You laid out some of the resources that are already heading there. President Biden has approved $60 million in federal funding. The reality is that's the drop in the bucket of what is actually estimated to be needed to deal with this. What type of funding fight are you expecting in Washington?
Well, once this is all said and done, we're expecting this to be over $1 billion in terms of actually rebuilding the bridge, which could happen sometime over the next 5 years we're looking at here. So this is going to be a protracted fight to get the money that is needed for Baltimore. Of course, Congress needs money for a variety of items, both domestically and internationally. But this is something that the members of Congress from across the country will be impacted by if items aren't coming in, if cars aren't coming in, and they start to see the real impact of their constituents. I think that's where you're going to start seeing agreements down on Capitol Hill. Kristen?
I think you're absolutely right. That's where the pressure point will be coming from. And of course, Congress still on recess for another 2 weeks. Gary, thank you for your fantastic reporting. Really appreciate it. Our thoughts continue to be with the people of Baltimore. Coming up next, Ukrainian President Zelensky urges House Speaker Johnson to take quick action on war funding. Johnson's response straight ahead. You're watching Meet the Press now. Welcome back. It has now been 1 year since American journalist Evan Gershkovich was arrested in Russia on what the U.S. says are false charges. This was the front page of today's Wall Street Journal, where Gershkovich works. It features a large blank space under the headline, "His story should be here." Gershkovich is being held at a notorious Russian prison, and this week a Russian judge extended his detention for another 3 months. The Kremlin claims he was caught receiving secret information, but has yet to provide any evidence. The White House calls the charges ridiculous. My colleague Andrea Mitchell spoke with Evan's parents, who say they remain hopeful.
Evan is not here. It's been a year.
He spent all 4 seasons there. He spent his birthday and all the holidays.
No pessimism. Pessimism will kill all the hope.
So powerful to hear from them. NBC News Chief International Correspondent Keir Simmons joins me now. Keir, thank you so much for joining me. You just heard there from Evan Gershkovich's family. What are U.S. officials saying about his detention right now, Keir, and the prospects for getting him out?
Well, I think that, frankly, the quickest, perhaps most likely prospect is that there might be some kind of a swap, a prisoner swap, if you like. Now, even that is going to be extremely challenging because the person that it appears the Kremlin would like to see swapped, released, if you like, is a FSB officer who is in jail in Germany for murder. So it's in Germany because it's not something that the US has immediate kind of control over, if you like. That being said, the Biden administration releasing a statement, and I'll read some of it for you. As I have told Evan's parents, I will never give up hope either. We will continue working every day to secure his release. We will continue to denounce and impose costs for Russia's appalling attempts to use Americans as bargaining chips, and we will continue to stand strong against all those who seek to attack the press or target journalists, the pillars of free society. So that a message from President Biden. But of course, the president faces some real challenges here, not least, and we've talked about it before, the ethical issue that when you agree to negotiate like this, do you encourage a country like Russia to try to arrest more Americans to be able to negotiate, come back and negotiate again.
Yeah, that is an ongoing challenge for this administration, so many administrations past. It's just devastating when you read the fact that a Russian judge has now extended his detention. What can you tell us about the actual status of his case?
Well, he's in pre-trial detention, so he's not on trial. We don't even actually know, beyond espionage, what the details of the allegations are. Allegations, of course, as you say, that the Wall Street Journal, the US government and his friends and family absolutely, utterly deny. So he's being held in the Fortovo prison, which is a chilling place, frankly. It was a KGB prison, now in the FSB, which is the modern version of the KGB. So we know that much. We know that the U.S. ambassador has got some access to him. And I can tell you, too, that NBC News, as you know, continues to report from Russia. We have a incredible team in Moscow, and they did try to get access to the latest hearing, but were not given access. No media were. So the truth is that he could be held almost indefinitely in pre-trial detention, while the Russians give the impression that they are continuing to investigate.
Devastating from the perspective of his family and the journalism community, who is holding out hope that he will come home soon. Let me just zoom out a little bit here and ask you about Vladimir Putin. You were just in Moscow for the quote-unquote elections there. Talk about his grip on power right now. Has it expanded at this moment? How would you assess that?
Well, I think, look, it's a country of 11 time zones. So inevitably, incredibly difficult, even if you travel to Moscow, to know the truth. And in some ways, we've kind of gone back, haven't we, to Soviet times, where, you know, it's very hard to read what's really going on. And consistently now, Russia seems to be surprising us in terms of the events there. So there's that. But I can tell you that when you go to Moscow, as I do, there's a lot of military slogans around. The country is increasingly economically geared towards the military industry. President Putin's revisionist history, which he clearly believes, is also, as far as I can tell, believed by a lot of Russians, or at least ostensibly that is what they will tell you. Clearly there are also Russians opposed to President Putin, and then there are Russians who kind of just say nothing. Very difficult to judge. There's very little independent polling at all. But the reason why I mention all that, and I think it's important, as you say, with a wider lens, is that President Putin likely now has another 12 years ahead. We don't know. He just got elected in that so-called election for 6 more years. But beneath him are officials who will repeat what he says, and some of them at least, to be vehemently agreeing with the kinds of things he talks about. And then the Russian people many of them do appear to be very supportive of him, and to believe that, for example, America is trying to crush Russia, and that Russia has to fight back.
Well, your work in Moscow, it was just extraordinary, and so we so appreciate your perspective, Keir, this Good Friday. Thank you so much. Good to see you, Keir, as always. Thank you. Meanwhile, Ukraine's leader is ramping up his efforts to secure more U.S. funding in his war with Russia. President Zelensky says he spoke with House Speaker Mike Johnson yesterday, and that he briefed the speaker on the current state of the war, emphasizing what he said was a, quote, dramatic increase in Russia's air terror. It is unclear how the House will address the issue of Ukraine aid when members return from recess. Johnson has thus far refused to put the Senate bill on foreign aid on the House floor. Joining me now to discuss all of this is NBC News Capitol Hill correspondent Ali Vitale. Ali, great to see you. So President Zelensky and Speaker Johnson, we know they spoke yesterday. What was President Zelensky's message to Speaker Johnson?
that they need more aid from the United States. Of course, this message hasn't changed, Kristen, as Zelensky has continued the conversation with top officials in Washington, at times visiting here, making addresses in front of elected officials in the United States, and of course, just continuing to impress the need that Ukraine needs American support to continue its defensive against the Russian incursion that's still ongoing there in that country. Of course, that need for aid comes in direct conflict with the dynamics within this very rowdy House Republican conference, many of whom say they don't want to continue giving aid to Ukraine, and leaving the House Speaker in a precarious position on one of myriad number of issues that he's in a precarious position on. And it leads to the current stalemate that we see now in this Congress, with a demand for more aid, not just for Ukraine, but also for Israel, for Taiwan, and a supplemental aid package that is just pretty much sitting there waiting for something to happen to it.
Yeah, they certainly will have a lot on their plates when they return from recess. Allie, let me ask you about this idea of getting the aid passed in the form of a loan. We know that former President Trump, who basically has made it very clear he's opposed to just writing a blank check to Ukraine, has backed this idea of a loan. We know that, for example, I was able to interview Senator Lindsey Graham just a few weeks ago. He indicated he would support that and that there is momentum for that. Is there momentum? Is that real?
Maybe. I asked the top Democrat on the House side here, Hakeem Jeffries, about this because it had seemed in our conversations with other top Democrats here in the House that there could be an openness to that as a pathway. But what Jeffries told me is that the ideal way of doing it remains doing it in the form of the supplemental package that not only takes care of aid to Ukraine, but also takes care of aid to Israel and Taiwan. But there's an interesting piece of Zelensky's readout of his meeting with House Speaker Mike Johnson. I'm going to read to you a part of it because it really caught our attention on the front of, is a loan plausible? Zelensky says that in his conversation with Johnson, quote, "We also discussed the importance of cutting off Russia's sources for funding for its war as soon as possible and using frozen Russian assets for Ukraine's benefit." That's one of the mechanisms, Kristen, that's being talked about by those who are pushing the idea of a loan to Ukraine. That's one of the mechanisms that they're talking about. The fact that Zelensky's bringing it up and that he's talking about it with Johnson gives us more questions to ask when they get back here from their recess.
It certainly does. Allie Vitale, fantastic as always. Have a happy Easter, Allie. Thank you so much. Great to see you. After the break, a rare look inside the territory of Haiti's top gang leader, the man known as Barbecue, who is now saying he may be open to peace talks in the future of the country. You're watching Meet the Press now. Welcome back. Gang leader Jimmy Cherichet has become the face of Haiti's descent into chaos. The man known as Barbecue and his gangs have taken over parts of Haiti's capital, Port-au-Prince, and sparked some of the worst violence in the country that it's seen since the early 90s. Now the gang leader is saying he would consider calling a ceasefire, but only if his alliance of armed gangs is included in international talks on the country's future. Stuart Ramsey, the chief correspondent of NBC's partner Sky News, sat down with the notorious gang leader and got a rare look inside Barbecue's territory.
He's not responsible for all the violence sweeping across Haiti's capital, but be under no doubt he's at the center of it. His fighters are never far away.
Is this now all your territory? Because it was an open road when I was last here.
Yeah. Jimmy Cherichet, universally referred to here as Barbecue, is the head of one of the most powerful gangs in Port-au-Prince. But he's also the head of a gang consortium that's brought Haiti to its knees. He took us through the roadblocks of buses they've put in place to stop police raids on his territory. That territory now extends over one of the city's main roads, an economic highway he controls in its entirety. Barbecue sees himself as a revolutionary for the people, and he rails against corrupt politicians and oligarchs. He dismisses all the efforts underway here to form a transitional council that will govern Haiti. But for the first time, he's told Sky News he would consider a ceasefire and talks if his people are represented. This is significant.
Nous croyons dans le dialogue. nous pour dialogue, nous toujours prôner pour un dialogue. Mais groupe moun sa qui la classe politique ça qui là, yo pas là pour dialogue. Raison parce que yo pas pour Haïti dans cœur ou même genre avec nous. Classe politique qui là y a fait une exclusion côté que y a besoin bandi, nèg azam baladan. Mais son façon pour renouveler le système Jean Lia parce que le système nan il dans bout li. Et écart qui gagne entre moun riche et moun pauvre en Haïti en li trop. Dans le monde entier gagne écart entre moun riche et moun pauvre. Mais Jean fait en Haïti ali indécent. En nous prêt toute solution depuis c'est haïtien qui sous table. Nous même nous prêt pour nous chita parler avec tout le monde parce que ça qui passe dans pays là nous pas fiers.
Inside his territory, despite the poverty, life is relatively peaceful and organised. Unlike in much of Port-au-Prince, queues for food barbecue gets brought in are orderly. Usually it's chaos. But here people wait knowing that there are enough supplies for the whole community. This is a source of barbecue strength. To the outside world, he may be a gangster, but here he's a sort of Robin Hood.
Well, we're right in the heart of barbecue's gangland territory, and I have to say the atmosphere here is very different to large parts of the rest of Port-au-Prince. It's much more chilled, much more relaxed. There's aid distribution, it's not chaotic. What the sense you get from this is that people feel safe inside here. The battlefield is outside the barricades, which is over there. Here, this is much more like a normal town, if you like.
The road barbecue now controls is all but deserted. The signs of battle, the burnt-out cars and the deserted buildings are the visual signs of uprooted families who have been forced to flee in their tens of thousands. He says he's trying to rein the more violent gangs in. He says they need to change their ways or risk losing this revolution. But is it a revolution or just gangland violence? It's almost impossible to know. Stuart Ramsey, Sky News, Port-au-Prince.
What an extraordinary look at the situation inside Haiti. Thank you to Sky News' Stuart Ramsey for that remarkable reporting. Coming up after the break, controversy in South Carolina. The state is set to move forward with an unconstitutional congressional map that a federal court deemed racially gerrymandered. Stay with us. You're watching Meet the Press Now. Welcome back. This may actually sound unreal, but the congressional map that South Carolina will be using in November is illegal. Last year, a 3-judge panel concluded the Republican-led state legislature's map, quote, exiled 30,000 black voters to make a safer district for Republican Congressman Nancy Mace. But with the Supreme Court appeal still pending, South Carolina now joins Alabama, Georgia, and Louisiana as states where congressional maps were found to violate the voting rights of people of color, but were allowed to be used anyway. Joining me now is our authority on all things redistricting, Dave Wasserman. He's a senior editor and elections analyst at the Cook Political Report. Dave, thanks so much for joining me. I really appreciate it.
For sure.
So let's talk about what is happening in South Carolina. How does something like this happen, and what are the implications for November?
Well, oftentimes when these redistricting lawsuits are brought along racial lines, the strategy of the defendants, in this case South Carolina Republicans, is simply to run out the clock. And this South Carolina case was a bit unique in that the plaintiffs, civil rights groups and Democrats, they didn't lump this in with the Alabama and Louisiana cases, which were Voting Rights Act claims that the Supreme Court interpreted in their ruling last summer to lead to additional black majority seats. This was brought under a 14th Amendment equal protection claim that moving 30,000 black voters out of Nancy Mace's first congressional district into a black majority district violated the equal protection of those voters. And these court cases move slowly. And so the Supreme Court has not adjudicated this yet. And what happened here is the same federal panel that struck this down ruled that there wasn't an ideal recourse other than to let the elections for this year play out under this current map. I can understand why plaintiffs are outraged, not only here, but also in Florida and Georgia, where there are similar diminishing opportunities for minority voters to elect candidates of choice, but there was no remedy in the map for this fall's election.
And just to be clear for our viewers who say, well, hey, wait a minute, it's only March. There's plenty of time to redraw these lines. Why isn't there? Why is this in March something that's not feasible by November?
Well, keep in mind that the Supreme Court has not ruled in this case yet, which makes it difficult for the plaintiffs to try and press for more, at least temporary relief. And the filing period for the primary, which is in June, already opened in the middle of March. And so you would have to push back the entire election calendar, which is not unprecedented, but oftentimes the courts invoke something called the Purcell principle, which is that it's too close to an election to really make broad changes to the rules. And now, Democrats did score victories in Alabama and Louisiana, which offsets some of what North Carolina Republicans did. However, there is a widespread frustration on the part of these groups that Republicans are standing in the way of additional opportunity seats for minority voters.
Let's talk big picture for a minute, Dave. Now that the lines are drawn, now that you can see the maps in all of the different states, who do you think has the edge here, Democrats or Republicans?
The House is so interesting, and we are looking at a redistricting wash practically, because Republicans, they gerrymandered North Carolina to wipe 3 to 4 Democratic seats off the map. Democrats benefit from Alabama, Louisiana, and also modestly from a new map in the state of New York. Overall, looking at the House, Democrats do have, I think, their best opportunity to hold a lever of power in 2025 in the House. They're still slight underdogs in the chamber, but they only need to pick up 4 seats. And keep in mind that there are 17 Republicans in Biden districts, only 5 Democrats sitting in districts Trump carried in 2020. And so there are enough seats on the table, particularly in California and New York, for Democrats to get there. And Republicans, they're suffering a mass exodus right now. Their majority is essentially a majority of 1 seat or 1 vote that they can afford to lose at the moment. So it's very tight.
Yeah, it's going to be just extraordinary. It is so tight. Dave Wasserman, thank you for breaking all of that down for us. We really appreciate it. Have a good holiday weekend. Appreciate it. All right. Before we go, this week I sat down with the Republican governor of New Hampshire, Chris Sununu, and the Democratic governor of neighboring Massachusetts, Maura Healey, for a fireside chat at the Edward M. Kennedy Institute. Our wide-ranging conversation touched on governing in times of crisis, grappling with political division, and working across the aisle. Take a listen to what they had to say.
Sometimes it feels like we are most unified as a country when there is a crisis. And we are facing a moment where we are dealing with a country that is very divided. Is it as divided as we perceive it to be? And Governor Sununu, I'll start with you. How do you think about the divisions in this country?
It's not as divided as people think. It's really not. Because of how we consume information, because of how, whether it's social media or the regular media, because of how the politicians have become almost celebrities, which is really wrong, by the way. So the spectrum within our parties has always been there, but unfortunately some of the constructs today allow those voices to control the microphone, even though they're a minority within our parties.
I agree with so much of that, and just want to underscore, there is far more that unites us than divides us as a country. It's also the case that 87% of Americans are sick and tired of the polarization. And 82% have real questions about democracy and the threat to democracy in this country.
Now, we also discussed the 2024 election and the issues that they believe will be at the forefront of voters' minds. Both governors agreed that abortion will once again be a key issue. Look.
Conventional wisdom has always been that with elections, it's the economy, stupid. But in the midterms, we saw that reproductive rights played a very large role. Governor Healey, what forces do you think, what issues, we're talking about policies, what issues do you think will be at the forefront?
Certainly abortion. This is Donald Trump's Supreme Court, and it's very clear. I mean, Donald Trump had his way. He appointed his Supreme Court. We saw Dobbs. We saw the overturning of Roe. And we have seen in an election after an election that this is an area where actually Republicans and Democrats have a lot of agreement that women should have access and an ability to make that decision for themselves.
Governor Sununu, what issues do you think are going to be driving forces? What are you watching for?
There's two issues, and all the polls say it. It's inflation, it's the border, and then it's the abortion issue.
Yeah.
The abortion issue, the issue of abortion will rise. I don't think it's going to be like 22. It's a states issue now, right? Some states do it well, and some states don't.
Our thanks to both governors for a great conversation at the Edward M. Kennedy Institute for a really fantastic evening. That does it for us this hour. We will be back Monday with more Meet the Press Now. And if it's Sunday, it's Meet the Press on your local NBC News station. I'll have exclusive interviews with Congressman Jim Clyburn and Don Bacon. Don't miss that. I'll also be talking to Savannah Guthrie about her new book. You'll hear that as well as her Easter message. The news continues with Hallie Jackson right now.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.